Lawyers representing Madiba's former wife, Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, and the executors of the late President Nelson Mandela's will. Madikizela-Mandela has approached the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein to overturn a 2016 decision by the Mthatha High Court, which dismissed the application to acquire Madiba's home at Qunu in the Eastern Cape. Madikizela-Mandela maintains in court papers that the property is hers. She says former Land Affairs Minister Derek Hanekom did not consult her when donating the land to Madiba 1997. She claims that the property was built on land allocated to her in 1989. The Royal House of Mandela previously rejected Madikizela-Mandela's claim to the property, saying Madiba had wished that the Qunu residence be managed by the executors of his estate. The executors of Mandela's will argued in the High Court that Mandela's will clearly states that the property should be administered by the family trust. All right, and for more on this court case, let's cross live to our reporter in Bloemfontein, Teboho Letsaba. Teboho, good morning to you. We have already given a little bit of background to this case. Talk to us what is expected to happen today in court.
Yes, Palesa, a very good morning to you and the viewers at home. We're coming to you live from the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein, where the matter between Winnie Madikizela-Mandela and the executors of Mthatha Nelson Mandela's estate will be slugging it out right here at the Supreme Court of Appeal over the estate, which is the home of the family in Qunu, where Madikizela-Mandela is contesting the ownership of the property, saying it is rightfully hers, and she was not aware that there was a change of ownership which took place at that time. And of course, the executors are contending that it could have been unreasonable for her to claim that she was not aware that there was kind of ownership changing as far as the property is concerned. But with me to analyze what might be expected inside the Supreme Court of Appeal when the case gets underway at 9:45 this morning is my learned attorney here, Mthatha Leboha. Good morning, sir, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Tebo.
First and foremost, let's start with the grounds of this application, if you can take us through.
Before I get to the grounds of the appeal, let me just give a brief background of this matter. We will remember sometime on the 16th of November 1997, the Minister of Land Affairs donated the land to Mr. Mandela, wherein it was said that the land would be his sole and exclusive property. And then thereafter, before the land could be then donated to him, Mr. Mandela and Mrs. Mandela were involved in a customary marriage sometime in 1958. Then on the 14th of April 1958, they entered into a civil marriage. And again, it's also common cause, and she's not even disputing the fact that the time they entered into the civil marriage, their marriage was always out of community of property, which meant that whatever they could have accumulated or they accumulated during the subsistence of marriage, each party would keep it as his sole and exclusive property in this matter. And the main grounds again in the main application, which was said in the Eastern Cape, it was based on three grounds, which I can also summarize to be that the first one was that when she contended in her application that the minister's donation to Mr. Mandela of the land, it was unlawful. And the first ground was further that the customary marriage between herself as well as Mr. Mandela subsisted up until Mr. Mandela passed on. And then the third and the last ground was that when the land was donated to Mr. Mandela by Minister of Land Affairs, the community of Qunu, they did not consent to that land being donated to Mr. Mandela. And if one can also even explain briefly all the grounds that her main application was based on. She could not even respond to most of the allegations or even give a clear explanation. One being that when the minister did not consider her occupational rental as well as the usage of the land. And we should also bear in mind that the fact that she was involved in a customary marriage with Mr. Mandela, and they also entered into a civil marriage with Mr. Mandela, she had an exclusive right of usage of the land as well as the occupational right of the said land, as well as to the house in Qunu. And also coming now to the third ground, that her marriage with Mr. Mandela subsisted up until Mr. Mandela passed on. It cannot even be accepted legally, because Mr. Mandela entered into a marriage, and sometime in 1996, in April, they were also their marriage was dissolved according to by court. So she could not even contend that indeed her customary marriage with Mr. Mandela subsisted up until Mr. Mandela passed on. Up until after their marriage was dissolved by court, Mr. Mandela got into another marriage with Mrs. Grasha Machel. So that on its own, it simply means that her usage of the land as well as the occupation of the land then was cut short of the fact that their marriage then was dissolved by a court of law. Then the third ground being that the community of Qunu also had to consent to the donation of the land by the Minister of Land Affairs. The community cannot have consented to that land. Reason being that if they should have consented, or they had a problem, rather the community had a problem with the land being donated to Mr. Mandela, they should have said that, but our rights and interests in that land would have been infringed, or would rather been infringed by the fact that the minister have donated the land to Mr. Mandela. And that is not even the case. Again, we would also note Mr. Bantu Holomisa also in his answering affidavit, as well as the answering affidavit filed by Chief Mthatha, also said that Mr. Dalinchebo, who then gave Mrs. Mandela the occupational right, that Mr. Dalinchebo at that time, he was in exile up until 1990. So he could not have granted Mrs. Mandela the occupational right as well as the usage of land.
All right. You heard it from the learned attorney Mthatha about the grounds of the application in the matter, and of course the executors are opposing the application by Winnie Madikizela-Mandela. That's all from us here in the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein. It's back to you in studio.